Good morning, good evening. It's Sarina Michaels here. Namaste. Coming to you with another little insight, stream of consciousness teaching that Spirit leads me to do from time to time. So I was having a conversation in my Facebook community about crows. We were talking about messages that crows have brought me, and the person asked if I would tell her some of my crow stories. And then I got to thinking about that, and I thought, well, I can tell some crow stories, but it's better if you can see my face while I'm telling them. So I'm doing a little video. But I'm also going to preface my crow stories with a shamanic understanding of a spirit animal guide or a spirit animal teacher. Some would call them spirit animal totems. And there's a little bit of difference in those terms, and there's lots and lots out there that you can read or watch on YouTube to get a deeper understanding. But I'll just give you a little flavor from my perspective as a shamanic practitioner and from my life experience. So when you first get involved in shamanism, and you don't have to become a practitioner, you're just involved. Anyone can do a shamanic journey once they've learned how. And when you go on shamanic journey, you will often meet teachers in the lower and upper worlds, teachers of all kinds, plants, rocks, angels, ascended masters, ancestors, and animals. The talking kind, because in the non-ordinary reality of shamanic journey, there are no limitations such as we have in this 3D reality. It's actually entering through a portal into a multidimensional environment. Okay, so when I first got involved about 10 or 11 years ago, I met an animal, actually a large raptor, met me in the lower world and gave me his name and said he would like to assist me. And so he's what some call a helping spirit. He's like on my team of helping spirits. Particularly when I journey for myself or for clients, he will show up and go along with me or transport me on his back, or I will transmute into a bird like him and we will fly together. It's fascinating and wonderful. So there are some animal spirits that would like to experience human life in the 3D reality. And the way that they do that is by volunteering to be a spirit helper to a human being, which is what happens when you encounter your either what you might call your power animal, who might stay with you for many years or even a lifetime, or a spirit helper who might be there just temporarily, even for just that one journey. So that's my basic little teaching on spirit animals. They are in non-ordinary reality, and they will come and talk to you and give you messages or help you with the journey that you're on when you are doing a shamanic journey. Now, in the 3D reality that we live in, this also manifests in that animals, birds, etc., what we call all our relations. Now, in the Native American traditions, I'm not sure which tribe, and as you can see, I'm not indigenous, and I give gratitude and thanks to them for all their wonderful teaching. But in some of their tribes, they will teach you that the expression all our relations means that we are related to everything. And of course, the shamanic view is that all is one and that we're all together energetically. And so we talk about the rock people, the plant people, the winged, the swimmers, the four-legged, the six-legged, the eight-legged, etc., all being our relations. So here in 3D reality, we can receive messages from any of those relations and from the elements and the elementals, like the wind, water, fire, earth, Mother Earth herself, who's a living being. There's the ability to connect energetically and receive messages here in 3D reality. So an example of how a spirit animal guide might show up in 3D reality is let's take for example, a red hawk. You're working away during COVID. Of course, a lot of us working at home, work. We might be looking out our window, and a red hawk comes and settles down there. Now you're surprised. Oh, I've not seen a red hawk on my window before. How interesting. And he flies away at some point. And then a few days later, he comes back. And then a few days later, he comes back. When you've seen an animal approach you several times, 3 or more, you can take it as a true thing that a message is being conveyed to you. So the first thing that I always recommend is that you study the characteristics of the animal. This animal, the spirit of the animal is motivating, the spirit, the oversoul of all the hawks, for instance, in this case, would be motivating a particular hawk to come to you. It's not that particular hawk that's communicating with you, but it's the spirit of the hawk, the genre hawk, coming to you. And so you will study the characteristics of the hawk. You might put a hawk on your altar if you have one, or wear a hawk pendant, or in some way honor the hawk in your life. Sometimes you might want to put on some music and fly around the house like a hawk. The hawk will actually experience it through you, the spirit of the hawk. This is why when you go to powwows, etc., you see people wearing the heads of eagles and bears and other spirit animals that have strong medicine for them, strong impact in their lives and in the lives of their families, or even their clans. Okay, it can be a generational thing as well. So having said all of that, I became aware when I first left the East Coast and drove to the West Coast of crows in a more specific way. Everywhere I went along the way, and it was a long drive because I sold everything I owned. I had quit my corporate job and I had left my church and my marriage. A long story, another time. Spirit-led. But all I had left was what I could fit in my car. And so I was gradually making my way across the country. And this was in my early 60s. So I wasn't rushing. Not a young person. And I would see crows at the motels where I stayed, at restaurants. They suddenly began to come to my notice. And not in the sort of way that, oh, there's a crow, or crows are around, where you live. The crows are everywhere, aren't they? But crows began to intrude upon my notice. I would hear them talking to each other, and I would stop and look up as if they were calling to me. And I began to be more and more aware of crows. And so, I was a very young person in the shamanic world. I knew that, consciously speaking, I knew that animals could bring you messages. So I began to open myself up to the idea that a crow could bring me a message. How, I couldn't tell. So the first experience, my first significant crow story that I recall, which I love, is when I reached the Continental Divide, which is in the center of the United States. It's the place where the continent, one side of the continent is connected to the Pacific side, the West. The other side is connected to the Atlantic. So any rivers or bodies of water on the Atlantic side, those bodies of water will run toward the Atlantic, and vice versa. On the western side, those waters will run toward the Pacific. And it's actually there's actually, I believe, a tectonic involvement there where the different plates divide the continent. So when you're crossing over the Continental Divide in the United States, there's an awful lot of signage. Continental Divide, and then they will give you an elevation depending on what state you're in, because of course the divide goes all the way from the top where it's Canada all the way down through into Mexico. So where I was crossing, and I don't remember now, it's too many years ago, there was a large parking lot. Like, stop, take a minute, experience the idea that you're in the middle of the continent of North America. So I stopped. I was the only car in the parking lot. It was the middle of a July, I believe it was a July day. Yes, July 2015. Excuse me. And as I rolled my windows down, I was just sitting there and listening to the quiet, because I was out in the Great Plains now, the Great Plains of Kansas and Oklahoma and the Dakotas. And there's just vast, vast miles of rolling plains with nothing, sometimes no trees. Often you can't see any mountains. It's just vast and amazing. So I'm sitting there, and 3 crows flew down, don't know where they came from, and landed on the concrete, the pavement, right beside my car door on the driver's side, where I could see them. And they were in a little line looking up at me. And I went, oh, hello. How odd. I don't have any food, because my assumption, is always they want food. They want you to give them food. They know that human beings, squirrels and crows and jays and bears, and they all know that we have food, right? Ducks, geese, etc. But no, that wasn't the sense. I didn't get any sense of that. They just looked at me, cocking their little heads, looking little beady little eyes. And then they looked at each other and they went, yak, 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 yak. And then they looked back at me as if to say, what do you think? And I'm sitting there kind of like, what's this all about? And then they went to each other, yak, 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 yak. You know how crows are, and they have their little throaty noises they do, deep in the throaty noises, like they have their own language, I've done some research on crows, and they actually have facial recognition, they use tools, and they have a vocabulary and the intelligence of a 7-year-old human, approximately. So this went on for a while. They just looked at me and talked about me. I could just feel that they were talking about me. And then at some point they flew up onto the fence that was ringing the parking lot, and they just continued this conversation. And I didn't really have any sense of what they were talking about or why me at the time. But I just enjoyed it, and if this happens to you with an animal, they approach you in the wild, just be still and see what happens. See how it goes. Of course, I'm not recommending you do that with a bear or a wolf, but you know what I'm saying. Little animals that cannot imperil your life. But after a while I left, and as I was driving along, I just had this strong sense of a connection to those crows. Like, even though I drove away, we were still connected. And as I came to understand and learned over the next couple of years, when the spirit, the animus of a genre of animal contacts you, it won't be the first or the last time. So over the years, since I've been here in California, crows have come to me many times. Probably the most significant was the day I received my cancer diagnosis 4 years ago now. I was going out to have a mammogram, and I got in my car and I was driving along the street. My doctor had been plaguing me for 2 or 3 years, and I had just been ignoring her because I'm an older lady, and I'm like, what's the point, and she had been calling me a Dr. Dodger. So finally I had made the appointment. Now off I was going, and the entire street was lined with crows. And now I live in a cul-de-sac, and it's quite a deep cul-de-sac. It's not just this little dip off the main road. It's long. It's about 15 houses deep. So as I'm driving out, and we live at the end where it's completely closed off. So as I was driving out, every single house had a crow in its yard looking at me. If you can picture it, my car's going down the road, and then all in every front of every house and every yard or garden, as you might call it, is a crow looking at me. It was very unnerving. There was a crow in every single yard. So we're talking about 20 crows at least, one on each side of the street, looking at me as I drove out of the cul-de-sac. So I'm driving to the doctor's, and I'm thinking, okay, something's up. And they're just letting me know, giving me some time to prepare myself. And that was the day that I had the mammogram, and they said, oh, can you wait, and can we do a sonogram? I'm like, okay. And then they did a sonogram, and they said, oh, can you wait? We'd like to do a needle biopsy. Right, this is all in one day. And I was very fortunate that my health insurance and my doctors were all in that same medical complex. Had a needle biopsy and knew within 2 days that I had breast cancer. So that's another story. I'm well. I'm in total remission. But the crows were there that day. You know, I've had other experiences with crows. I've often gone camping and getting out into Mother Nature and by myself. I often go to the state parks. I like to go to the redwoods, etc. The national parks as well. And then I've driven across the country a couple of times and stayed in lots of places. There's always a crow, even in places where there are no other crows, and you know they live in families. And you know that it's very odd to see a single crow. It's just odd. And when one of them dies, they mourn. My daughter told me one time when she went down into Santa Monica on a very busy street, there was a crow that had died. I don't know if it was hit by a car or it was a natural death, whatever. It was lying in the driveway of the parking garage as she drove in. And all these crows were standing around it grieving, kind of like you hear about the elephants, you know, singing their death song over a dead elephant. The crows were really obviously terribly upset. So my daughter got out of the car and didn't know what else to do. She's not particularly spiritual or interested in things of the spirit at this time in her life, but she could feel the anguish of the family of the crow. So she got a newspaper, she picked it up, and she put it in a receptacle, you know, and they seemed, after that, they flew away and they were okay. So, I mean, I've just noticed that crows come around and talk to me. I'll be sitting in my camp chair and I'll hear, you know, that kind of throaty thing they do. And I'll look around, where are the crows they're talking to? And there don't seem to be any other crows, and no other crows are answering them. And so they just come and talk to me. And there's something about me that attracts crows. Again, it may be that animus, that spirit of the crow, that is drawing them to me. And so usually when that happens, I will sit and have a time of meditation to see if there's any message. So that's about it. I've been going on for over 15 minutes now, so I think that I will conclude with that. But I just want to encourage you all that no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, you're perfectly capable of recognizing if an animal or a plant, like some of us talk to our plants and our plants respond, is reaching out to you. And if you quiet yourself, sometimes you'll hear inside your mind or inside your heart, you'll hear a message. So there you go. Love you all. Namaste.